Hello everyone, it is the Bookatarian here for another video. Today I will be filming my review of Shatterglass, which is the fourth book in the second quartet by Tamora Pierce in the Circle of Magic world. If you don't know what this series is about, the first book follows the four main characters, Triss, Briar, Daja, and Sandry, and they are all, for one reason or another, kind of cast out of their living situations, all in different ways and for different reasons, and they are found by this mage called Niclorin Goldeye, who brings them to Winding Circle Temple, which is a kind of religious school type of thing where they teach magic in a more religious way, because all the mages there are called dedicates and devote themselves to temples for different, I suppose, gods that they follow. And this is also a regular school as well, so they have students that live in dorms, and all four of these characters go to live in dorms, but for some reason or another, they all end up getting kicked out of dorm life and sent to live at Discipline Cottage, and there they all become really good friends with each other over the span of the first book and start to discover that they are indeed mages as well, or at least they have magic, and it follows their journeys to become these great mages. So, like I said, I didn't enjoy this book as much as I enjoyed the previous three, despite the fact that the plot is handled, I think, in a better way, as it's less formulaic, or as to say, less of the same kind of thing happening over and over again that we saw in the previous three books, where essentially the same plot basically was happening over and over again. And the same plot that I'm referring to is that we know, or at least have a very strong idea right away, as to who is committing these crimes. And so I didn't enjoy this book as much as I enjoyed the previous three books because of the character development and the characters themselves. I don't enjoy Triss or Nico as much. They're not my favorites, but their story was still really interesting and really intriguing, as this time we did not know who was committing all of these murders. And that's the plot of this book, is that in this town, which I can't remember its name because it was very hard for me to pronounce a lot of the words in this book. Like, the language was just really hard for me to wrap my mind around, unfortunately. So, and the town that they are is supposed to be inspired by Indian culture, so they have a caste system. And there's been a series of, I think, 3 or 4 murders before the story takes place, and we follow this plot as it continues. And we follow the main investigator behind these murders, who is called Dima. I'm just going to call him that because his full name is very, very hard for me to pronounce, as everything else in this book seems to be. So we follow Dima, who is investigating these murders of women from the 5th caste. So it's just above the absolute lowest caste you can possibly go. And the lowest caste are essentially equal to the unspeakables, if you know anything about Indian caste system lore and how they used to have their caste system. The lowest of the low are people who deal with trash, the sewage system, and dead bodies. And dealing with the dead bodies is actually very important in this culture, because they believe that if you don't cleanse the area where a dead body has died or is just there, then you can risk death spreading like a disease throughout the city because of a blood plague or something that happened in their area a few centuries ago. They were actually they managed to survive in their city because of how clean they kept it, and they assumed that it was because of how their ritualistic beliefs of treating dead bodies were the reason as for why they were protected from it, and not just general cleanliness. Okay. Because of their cultural beliefs in handling dead bodies, it is actually very hard for Dima to do his job and solve the murders, because he can't trace them with magic, because it would be putting his family name and status at risk by tampering too much with the dead body, which is a wonder how anyone does anything in this town if that is the main problem. So That was obviously a main issue to try and contend with in this book, trying to get around these really strict rules as far as how someone can deal with a dead body and use magic on it to find the murderer. And so Triss was involved right away, especially when the first murder of the that happened in the book was Iralima, who is one of Triss's students. His housemates essentially was killed by this murderer. And so he is taking this all very personally and wants to help solve the murder because his housemate also happened to have a child that she left behind. And so he's just very interested, essentially, in solving this murder. And his name's Keth, by the way, is Triss's student. I also didn't like him very much. His development was kind of wonky. It was still done well enough, that you could see where he started and how he's grown, and fine. I just didn't care for him as a person, as I also don't care for Triss and Nico so much as who they are either. So, I mean, good. You can all fit together over here, and I will stay with Daja, Briar, and Sandy as my favorites over here. Safe from you and the people I don't like. So there's that. And also, there was Yali, who is another housemate of Keth's, who ended up getting killed as well, which is all very unfortunate. Because apparently, towards the end, it was revealed that, shocker, Yali and Keth were not quite romantically involved, but he had a crush on her, or he felt very strongly towards her, and their relationship was very close, which I wish they would have just kept it as close friends, because I didn't see very much development towards, oh yes, they were possibly going to be romantically involved at some point. What? There was nothing hinting to that. Nothing from Keth and his interactions towards Yali. We barely got to see them together at all before she died, so I just found it very hard to believe that he was supposedly getting close to falling in love with her. I couldn't believe that. It wasn't done well enough for me to believe that that was a possibility. So yeah, that part of his character development was just kind of a head scratcher. And his interactions with Triss were very annoying as far as he took this hard to believe you are a mage when you are so young thing that's happened in all the other books and just brought it up to the next level. Like, he was so stubborn and wasn't listening to anything that Triss was saying to try and help him get this under control and come to grips with the fact that, yes, you do have lightning magic. Yes, you do need to learn how to control it. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to go on doing pure glasswork, because everything you make is somehow infused with magic and turning out into a dud-like state. And it took a long time for him to get to that, and he was also super afraid of lightning, which is reasonable when you get struck by lightning and somehow survive. And another thing that I didn't quite like about that was his storytelling of how he recovered from his lightning. It seemed to happen very quickly. And also, he made it seem like he was paralyzed from the lightning strike, and he's like, oh, I fought so hard to overcome my paralysis. I'm like, well, it's not that easy. That I didn't enjoy that much. Thankfully, we didn't think too much on it, aside from the fact that every time he stuttered, he was just like cursing himself, like, oh, I wish I didn't have this stutter. I'm like, it's not that bad to speak with a stutter. Like, it's not. There are worse things, dude. You could still be paralyzed. So his complaining and all that jazz was just. As for Nico and his character development, it was weird. He attended this convention for mages that are kind of like him to make this grand display. And his excuse for not being involved in the murder for as long as he was the most hard for me to believe compared to everybody else. The one thing that I did like with Nico's character arc is how he did eventually give Triss the resources to learn how to scry the winds. Something that she asked him to let her learn from the very beginning of the book. And so it was nice development to know that he trusts her enough to learn how to scry the winds and not go mad like he's warning her away from it. He told the story about one of his good friends from school who went mad, who knew how to scry the winds for the future. And what Triss is doing is scrying present time and not trying to predict the future, thankfully. So I think that's why she's able to manage it in a reasonable way and not go insane. Oh, yes, watching Dima use his rank to help solve the murder when he ended up having his house or his family pay for all of these investigators to go undercover as Yaskadashi, who are the 5th level, that's their name, essentially. So they're all undercover as these performers in Kapik. They're all undercover as performers in Kapik, and they do a really bad job of it because they're all just like super grim-faced and serious, and House comes back to Dima with the like helpful criticism. We're like, you know what, they're all so serious, and anyone who's been there regularly could tell that they're not actually performers, so, you know, maybe you want to talk to them about that. And that part just made me laugh. They're all so bad at going undercover because they don't associate with Yaskadashi very much, to the point where they would know how they behaved. A lot of the magic in this book just kind of got yada-yada'd out of the way with no explanation, especially when Triss asked Glocky, who is one of the murder victim's daughter. She figures out that Glocky has potential signs of magic, so she asks her to make some images in the pictures. She just says, I know you can do it, so can you show me some images in the fire? And I'm like, based on those instructions, how? How is Glocky supposed to do this? There was no specific instruction, no meditation leading up to that point. Like, how was she supposed to know how to do it? She does it somehow. But again, there's not enough of a satisfying reason as for how these people are able to do all of these things in this book. We come to find the mystery of who done it. Like, at the last chapter, I was surprised that I couldn't figure out who had done it before this time, but it took almost the entire book before we finally discovered who it was, and the foreshadowing, I have to admit, was pretty subtle and well done throughout the entirety of this book, because none of the victims had seen who their murderers were. So it was mostly just believed that he attacked them from behind. The reason that he was murdering these Yaskadasi women was because he was born of someone of the first class and a Yaskadasi, and neither of them wanted to claim them, so they just kind of abandoned him, and he ended up becoming Parth Muni for some reason, because he's a bastard. Not entirely sure how that works, but because his mother gave him up, he's so angry at Yaskadasi that he's just going to go around murdering them because of that. Okay, I'm not at all surprised that a Parth Muni would be the one to do this, because they are all treated so terribly. For a long time while I was reading this book, I was hoping that it would be an inside police job, like the police, one of the higher up, like maybe commanders of the police officers were behind this, because there was so little evidence and so little support behind Dima and his investigation of all of these murders, that I was hoping it would be an inside job and we could get a good look at corruption in the police force as a theme in this book. Unfortunately, it was not. I really kind of wish it was, because that would have made everything so much more interesting that I have to talk about. I'm glad that Glocky is coming back to Winding Circle so she can learn how to control her academic magic, which is not a type of magic we typically focused on in these stories in this particular world. We've mostly focused on ambient magic, so it'll be nice to kind of see how the other side learns, essentially. She is very young, and I don't know how much of a role she'll play in the next several books, but I'm hoping she'll at least get like a few scenes here and there, maybe. Probably not. So yeah, there's that. And of course, Chime is coming with Triss because they've grown so close in the past like week and a half or something that this book took place. So that is pretty much all I have to say about this book. I did enjoy it. I know it sounds like I didn't enjoy it as much as how many times I'm saying, I didn't like this or that, but I did really enjoy the read, surprisingly more than I apparently did the first time, as I gave it 4 stars. This time, when I originally read it, I apparently gave it 3 stars, which is interesting. But either way, I still had a great time reading this, and thank you all so much for watching this video. Hit the like button down below if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more content from me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in my next video soon. Bye.